My name is Celeste Whitmore, and I was 26 years old when my life changed because of one phone call. At the time, I lived in a small apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I had a good marketing job, a quiet life, and a boyfriend named Fletcher. Things were not perfect, but they were peaceful. I thought I knew where I belonged in the world. Then my mother called on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice sounded calm, almost too calm. After a few moments of small talk, she told me something that made no sense. "Celeste, it would be better if you didn't come home for a while. Brennan needs some space." I sat there in silence. "Space from me?" I asked. "Yes," my mother replied. "Please respect her wishes." That was it. No explanation. No argument. No reason. My sister Brennan was 3 years older than me. We were never best friends, but we were never enemies either. We talked during holidays, exchanged messages sometimes, and stayed polite with each other. 3 weeks earlier she had even sent me a picture of a new couch she bought. I had told her it looked nice. Everything seemed normal. So why suddenly did she not want me around? What bothered me even more was my mother's behavior. She was the kind of person who apologized for everything. If dinner was late, she apologized. If she forgot a birthday card, she apologized. But during that phone call, she never said sorry once. The second strange thing was my father. He wasn't on the call. My father always handled serious family conversations. He believed people should face problems directly. Yet this time he stayed completely silent and let my mother speak for him. The whole situation felt wrong. I asked my mother if I had done something. There was a long pause. Then she said, "It's nothing specific. Brennan just needs space right now." Nothing specific. The answer explained nothing. After we hung up, I sat alone on my kitchen floor. I stared at the wall and replayed every word in my head. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but it left me with questions I couldn't answer. That day something changed inside me. For the first time, I stopped accepting things at face value. I started paying attention. And once I started noticing things, I couldn't stop. Over the next few weeks, I kept thinking about that phone call. The more I thought about it, the more old memories started coming back. At first, they seemed small. The kind of things people usually ignore. Then I started noticing a pattern. When Brennan turned 16, she got a used Honda. It wasn't fancy, but it gave her freedom. She drove herself to school, to friends' houses, and to part-time jobs. I remember standing in the driveway watching her leave with the windows down and music playing. When I turned 16, things were different. I got a birthday card, a cake, and a savings bond. My father told me it would be useful someday. I thanked him and smiled because that was what I always did. After that, I learned bus schedules and walked home when I missed them. At the time, I convinced myself there was a reasonable explanation. The same thing happened with my bedroom. Brennan changed hers whenever she wanted. One year she wanted bright colors. Another year she wanted everything blue. My parents helped her both times. I asked for green walls once. My mother said she would think about it. Nothing ever changed. By high school, I stopped asking. There was also a photograph above the fireplace. It had always been there. My parents looked happy. Brennan was little, smiling between them. That picture stayed in the same spot for as long as I could remember. What stood out to me later wasn't that I wasn't in it. I hadn't been born yet. What stood out was that no picture ever replaced it. Not one family portrait from all the years that followed. Not one photo that included both daughters. Back then, I brushed those thoughts aside. But after the call, I couldn't anymore. Late at night, after Fletcher fell asleep, I opened the notes app on my phone and started writing things down. One memory led to another. My high school graduation came back to me. After the ceremony, I found my family already settled at dinner. They were halfway through their meals. The conversation was flowing without me. I sat down and tried to join in, but I felt like I had arrived at someone else's gathering. Then I remembered getting accepted to Ohio State with a full scholarship. I had worked for that moment for years. The reaction lasted less than a minute. A handshake from my father. A quick smile from my mother. Then life moved on. I kept typing. The list grew longer every night. By the time I finally stopped counting, there were 31 entries, 31 moments that never made sense on their own. But together, they felt like pieces of something much larger. The months kept passing, and nobody reached out to fix what had happened. One holiday became 2, then 3. I learned about family events after they were already over. Sometimes an aunt would mention something during a casual phone call, not realizing I hadn't been invited or even informed. Each time it happened, I felt less surprised. The distance slowly became normal. I focused on my own life instead. Work became a place where effort led to results. New projects came my way, and people trusted me with more responsibility. My days became busy, and for a while that helped. It gave me something solid to hold on to. Fletcher was there through all of it. He never pressured me to talk when I wasn't ready. But he noticed things. He noticed when I went quiet after hearing family news from someone else. He noticed when I stared at my phone after seeing my mother's name appear and then disappear without a message. He didn't try to solve anything. He simply stayed. That steadiness meant more than I knew at the time. Then one evening in March, everything changed. We were in our kitchen after dinner. Nothing special was happening. No fancy restaurant. No crowd. No photographer hiding nearby. Fletcher reached into his pocket and got down on one knee. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. He held out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother and asked me to marry him. The answer came out before he finished speaking. Yes. The happiness on his face was immediate and real. Later that night we called his parents. Their excitement filled the room. They asked questions, laughed, and talked about the future as if they had been waiting for this moment for years. Afterward, I called my own family. The conversation was short. When it ended, I sat quietly with my phone in my hand. The difference between the two calls stayed with me long after that night. Wedding planning started soon after. Fletcher's relatives jumped in with ideas and offers to help. Everyone seemed eager to be part of it. My family stayed distant. Weeks later, a greeting card arrived in the mail. I stared at it for a long time before placing it on the kitchen table. That night I made a decision. I would send them a wedding invitation just like everyone else. No special message. No emotional conversation. Their choice would be entirely theirs. A few days later, something unexpected arrived before any RSVP response could. I opened Meredith's message and read the first paragraph carefully. She introduced herself politely and thanked me for reaching out. Nothing unusual. Then I reached the second paragraph. The words seemed simple, but they changed everything. Meredith wrote that more than 27 years earlier, she had given birth to a baby girl and placed her for adoption. I stopped reading. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The office around me continued as normal. Phones rang. People walked past my desk. Someone laughed near the break room. It all sounded far away. I looked back at the message and forced myself to keep reading. Meredith explained that she had joined the DNA database years ago because she hoped her daughter might one day find her. She never expected it to happen. She said she saw my profile months ago but chose not to contact me. She didn't want to force herself into my life. She wanted the choice to be mine. That detail stayed with me. She had waited. When I got home that evening, I couldn't focus on anything else. After dinner, I sat quietly and read her message again. Then again. And again. The dates she mentioned kept pulling at my attention. Something about them felt familiar. I started doing the math. My parents had always told a story about my birth. According to them, I arrived earlier than expected and spent extra time under medical observation. It was a story I had heard many times growing up. But when I compared the timeline to the information Meredith shared, pieces started fitting together in a way I couldn't ignore. A cold feeling settled over me. The next day I stayed home from work. I pulled out old documents, searched public records, and spent hours reading information about adoption procedures from that time period. Every answer seemed to point in the same direction. By evening, I was sitting alone at my dining table with papers spread around me. I wasn't looking at random clues anymore. I was looking at a possibility. A possibility that explained years of strange moments I had never understood. The missing warmth. The distance. The feeling that I was always slightly outside something everyone else shared. None of it proved anything on its own. But together, it painted a picture I couldn't unsee. Late that night, I opened the Notes app on my phone and scrolled through every entry I had written. For the first time, those memories looked different. They no longer felt unrelated. They felt connected. And somewhere deep inside me, I realized I was getting closer to the truth than my family had ever intended. After that day, Meredith and I started exchanging messages more often. At first, the conversations were careful. Neither of us wanted to move too fast. We were strangers connected by something enormous, and both of us understood that. She told me about her life in North Carolina. She talked about the flowers she grew in her garden and how she spent every spring fighting weeds that always seemed to return. She told me about her children, who were adults now and building lives of their own. There was no pressure in her messages. She never asked me to call her mom. She never acted as though she was entitled to anything from me. She simply answered every question I had. That mattered. The more we spoke, the more I realized how different honesty felt from secrecy. When I asked Meredith something, she answered directly. If she didn't know something, she said so. If a memory was painful, she admitted it. There were no long pauses. No strange changes of subject. No careful attempts to avoid the truth. One evening, we had our first video call. I was nervous before it started. Then her face appeared on the screen. For several seconds, neither of us said much. We just looked at each other. I noticed little things immediately. The shape of her eyes. The way she smiled when she felt uncomfortable. Small details that felt strangely familiar. At one point she laughed, and something inside me tightened. I had heard that laugh before. Not exactly, but close enough to make me stare. For years people had told me I didn't look much like anyone in my family. It had always been treated as a joke. Now I finally understood why. As my relationship with Meredith slowly grew, another realization settled in. My parents had never planned to tell me. The evidence pointed in one direction every time. 28 years had passed. Not once had they sat me down. Not once had they trusted me with the truth about my own life. That hurt more than the adoption itself. Being adopted wasn't the betrayal. The lie was. The decision to hide it year after year was. And suddenly Brennan's behavior started making a different kind of sense. The distance. The awkwardness. The way she always seemed uncomfortable around me during family gatherings. It looked less like dislike and more like someone carrying information she wasn't supposed to have. I sat alone one night reading through my notes again. This time I wasn't searching for answers. The answers were already there. I finally understood why that phone call had happened. Someone in that family had been trying to keep a secret alive. And I was getting closer to finding out exactly who had made that choice. For 3 weeks after learning the truth, I said nothing to Brennan. I went to work every day. I answered emails, attended meetings, and continued planning the wedding. On the surface, everything looked normal. Inside, I was waiting. Not because I was unsure about what I had learned. I was waiting because I wanted to speak to Brennan when I could do it calmly. When Sunday finally arrived, I sat alone at my kitchen table before she called. The apartment was quiet. Fletcher had gone out to run errands, giving me space without even having to ask. When my phone rang, I stared at it for a second before answering. The conversation changed everything. After Brennan admitted she had known for years, something inside me settled. Not because I felt better. Because confusion had finally been replaced with facts. I listened while she explained what happened after she found those documents. She told me my parents had begged her not to say anything. They said they were protecting me. They said telling me would only create pain. As Brennan spoke, I kept thinking about how many family dinners, birthdays, and holidays had passed while everyone sat at the same table carrying completely different versions of reality. I remembered being 14 years old. I remembered being 16, 21, 25. At every stage of my life, they knew something about me that I didn't know myself. That realization hurt more than I expected. The hardest part came when we talked about the distance between us. For years I had wondered whether Brennan secretly disliked me, whether I had done something wrong without realizing it. Now I understood that every awkward conversation and every uncomfortable silence had been connected to the same secret. She had spent years avoiding a truth she didn't want to carry. And instead of facing it, she slowly stepped away from me. The phone call ended soon after. When the screen went dark, I stayed in my chair for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore, at least not in the loud way people imagine. The feeling was quieter than that, heavier. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot below. Cars came and went. People carried groceries inside. Life continued as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. For the first time, I could see the shape of what had happened. This wasn't one person's choice. It wasn't one mistake. It was a decision that had been protected by 3 people for years. And now every one of them knew that I knew. The silence was over. What happened next would be different. Over the next 3 weeks, the RSVP cards slowly started coming back. Fletcher's family responded first. Every envelope felt warm in my hands. There were little notes written in the margins, messy handwriting full of excitement. They were already talking about dancing, food, and how they couldn't wait for the day. It felt like being pulled into something soft and welcoming. Then one Tuesday, I saw my family's envelope. I knew my mother's handwriting before I even opened it. Inside were 3 names. My mother. My father. Brennan. All 3 marked as attending. No message. No words. Just the clean, boxed answers on a card like it was a routine form being returned. I sat at the kitchen table holding it longer than I should have. The paper felt heavier than it looked. Fletcher came home later that evening. He saw the card on the table before I even spoke. He didn't ask many questions. He just sat across from me and waited. I told him what I was going to do. He stayed quiet for a moment, then asked if I was certain. I said yes. He nodded and said he was with me. After that, everything became very clear in my mind. I wasn't planning to turn the wedding into a scene. I wasn't going to let it become something loud or messy. I had no interest in giving anyone the chance to call it emotional or unstable later. I wanted something simple. One moment where the truth could be spoken out loud. I called Meredith and asked if she would come. I explained everything carefully. There was a long silence on the line. Then she said she had waited most of her life for this moment, and she would be there. After that, I called my Aunt Patricia. She had always been different with me, kinder in ways I never fully understood. When I asked her if she had known anything, she didn't answer right away. After a long pause, she admitted she had suspected for years. She mentioned small things she had noticed but never been able to prove. She said she had once tried to ask my father about it, but he shut the conversation down so sharply that she never brought it up again. Her voice broke when she apologized. She said she was coming to the wedding no matter what, and she would stand with me wherever I needed her. When I hung up, I sat still for a long time. Everything I needed was now in place. People who knew the truth were coming. People who had hidden it were coming too. 6 weeks were left before the wedding. I opened my notes app one last time and read every entry again, one by one, slowly. Then I closed it. I didn't need it anymore. It was already inside me. The morning of my wedding felt unusually still. October light came through the window in a soft way, like the day itself was holding its breath. There was no shaking in my hands, no panic in my chest. Everything inside me felt settled, as if I had already lived through the hardest part long before this morning arrived. Fletcher's mother helped me into my dress. Her eyes filled the moment she saw me, and she held my face gently like she was trying to remember it. She said I looked beautiful and told me her son was lucky in a way that felt honest, not rehearsed. I believed her. That kind of warmth was new to me, but it didn't feel foreign anymore. By late morning, I saw my family arrive. My mother walked beside my father, and Brennan followed a step behind them. From above, they looked like a unit that had always moved the same way, as if nothing had ever split them apart. My father guided my mother lightly by the back, and Brennan kept her shoulders tight, like she already knew she was walking into something she couldn't avoid. A little after them, Meredith arrived. She wore a simple green dress and moved slowly through the space like she didn't want to disturb anything. I had arranged her seat carefully on my side, without telling my parents. When she sat down, she kept her hands folded in her lap, calm but alert, like someone who had been waiting a very long time for a moment she didn't fully control. Not long after, Aunt Patricia appeared and took a seat behind her. She looked up toward me once and gave a small nod, nothing dramatic, just steady understanding. The ceremony began, and everything went quiet in the way important moments do. When I walked forward, Fletcher looked at me like there was no one else in the room. We said our vows clearly, without rushing, and when we were told to kiss, the sound from the crowd filled the space like a release. During the reception, I moved through the tables with Fletcher beside me. People laughed, glasses clinked, music carried through the room. It all looked normal on the surface. I waited until the end before going to my parents' table. My mother hugged me first and said my dress was beautiful. My father said he was proud, his voice steady but careful. Brennan stood slowly, then hugged me tightly, too tightly, and leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "Celeste, please." I stepped back. She stopped speaking immediately. "I need you all to stay here for a few minutes," I said. "There's someone I want you to meet." I walked through the aisle between the chairs and stopped at the 5th row. Meredith stood when I reached her. She didn't hesitate. Her hand met mine like she had been ready for that exact moment for a long time, even if she had never known when it would come. We turned and walked together toward my parents' table. Every step felt louder than the music in the room. I could feel eyes shifting, conversation slowing, even without hearing it. My father noticed her first. His face changed immediately. Not slowly, not in pieces. It was instant, like something inside him shut off. He didn't stand. He just sat there, very still. My mother followed his gaze. Her expression broke the moment she saw Meredith. Her hand lifted to her mouth, like she was trying to stop a reaction from escaping. She couldn't. Brennan reacted differently. She closed her eyes, as if she already knew what was coming and had been waiting for it in silence for a long time. I stopped just in front of the table. I didn't sit. I stayed standing so there was no way to turn it into something casual or avoidable. Meredith stood just behind my shoulder, quiet, steady. I looked straight at my father. "I need you to answer one question," I said. "Honestly." He didn't respond. I continued anyway. "Am I your daughter?" The noise of the room kept going, but it felt far away, like it belonged to another place. Around us, people were still laughing and talking, but at that table everything had stopped. My father stared at me, then at Meredith, then back at me. His face tightened like he was trying to hold something together that no longer worked. Finally, he spoke. "No," he said. My mother made a sound that didn't form into words. She looked down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I didn't react the way I thought I might. There was no shock left in me, just confirmation of something I had already been carrying for a long time. "This is Meredith Calloway," I said. "She is my biological mother. She has been looking for me for 27 years. I didn't pause. I didn't wait for questions. I found out in February. I've known for months. I've already spoken to her. She's part of my life now." Then I turned slightly and took Meredith's arm. She stepped with me without resistance. Before walking away, I looked back once more. My mother was crying quietly now. My father still hadn't moved. Brennan was watching me differently than before, no anger, no denial, just something closer to understanding than anything I had ever seen from her. "Enjoy the rest of the reception," I said. I walked Meredith toward a table near the dance floor. Fletcher was already there. He had pulled out 2 chairs without being asked and placed a glass of water waiting, as if he had known exactly what would happen before it did. My parents left the reception about 40 minutes after everything happened. I found out from my phone. Aunt Patricia had texted me while I was on the dance floor, something simple and steady. "They left. Hold your head up. You did the right thing." I didn't reply right away. I just locked my phone and kept moving with the music, letting the night continue without breaking my rhythm. Brennan stayed. That was the thing I noticed most. She didn't rush out after my parents. She didn't disappear into the noise of excuses or exits. She stayed through the cutting of the cake, through the speeches, through laughter that filled the room like nothing had happened at all. Even when Fletcher's father spoke about love in a way that made half the guests wipe their eyes, she was still there, sitting still, watching everything like she was trying to understand where she belonged in it. I don't know what it cost her to remain in that chair. I don't think I ever will. Later, when the night was thinning out and people were slowly leaving, I stood near the exit with Meredith. That's when Brennan came to me. She stopped a few feet away first, then stepped closer. Her eyes moved from Meredith to me, holding there for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I should have told you," she said. Her voice was steady, but not strong. "I knew. I should have told you when I first found out. I didn't. And I've carried that every day since. I'm sorry." I looked at her for a long time. Not with anger anymore. Not with softness either. Just clarity. I thought about everything she had held alone since she was 17, and everything she chose to do with it. I thought about how choices don't exist in a vacuum, but they still leave marks. "I know," I said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was just the truth of where I was at that moment. She nodded once and walked away. After she left, Meredith and I stood in silence for a bit. The room was almost empty now. Lights were still on, soft and warm, reflecting off the wooden floor. Fletcher came over quietly and placed his arm around me without saying anything. Meredith looked at us and smiled in a way that felt like it carried a lifetime inside it. "You did well today," she said. "I planned it carefully," I replied. That made her laugh. It was the first time I heard it in person, and it sounded familiar in a strange way, like something I had always known but never placed. After that night, things didn't change all at once. My parents reached out twice, once through a letter, once through a voicemail. I read and listened, but didn't respond immediately. I wasn't avoiding them. I was just not ready. My connection with Meredith grew slowly, without pressure. No labels forced into place too quickly. Just time, conversations, and learning each other in pieces. Her children became part of my life too. Not as replacements, just as people who already had space for me without needing to rearrange anything. Aunt Patricia stayed close, steady as ever, holding things together in a way only she seemed able to do. Brennan and I didn't rebuild anything fast. We simply didn't close the door completely. Sometimes she calls. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I don't. And over time I understood something simple. Truth doesn't rush. It waits.